Hey guys, so it's been what, 2 months? It's a little sad. Yes, it's been 2 months since I filmed, and as you can tell, maybe, I am sick. At least I think I'm sick. Basically, I sound weird is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, just a little explanation for where I've been. I've been going to school. I started going to community college, which I think I mentioned before, but if not, now you know. And I've just been a little busy. I haven't really had the time to film. I haven't really wanted to film. So yeah, so today I'm going to do a wrap up for the books that I've read during the time that I was gone. So the first book I read, I actually read because of class, and we didn't read it in school, but we watched an adaptation of it, and that is A Midsummer Night's Dream by William Shakespeare. This was the first time I ever experienced this specific play by Shakespeare, and I loved it so much. We started watching it in class and we split it up into 2 days. Watched the first half the first day class and then the second half. So in between the 2 days of those 2 classes, I went out and I bought this version, which is the Folgers Shakespeare's Library edition, which is my favorite edition to read Shakespeare because on the one side it has what it said, like what it means in like regular English, and then in the original text is on the other side, so it's super easy to understand. As somebody who's kind of new to reading Shakespeare, I think this is the best edition to read because it's the most easy to understand. And this play I loved so much. I believe it's a comedy. It's not tragic in any way, so I guess it's a comedy, and it's pretty funny. My favorite part about this was the character of Nick Bottom, because the character Nick Bottom was based, the character in Something Rotten called Nick Bottom was based off of the character in this play, and I love the character in this play. I think he's so funny, and it makes so much sense that they based the character of Something Rotten off of him. If you don't know, Something Rotten is a musical on Broadway. Not anymore, it just got off Broadway, but it's on tour now. But it's like one of my favorite musicals, so like it makes so much sense that they based this character off of him, because they're both like goofy and like strong-willed and determined and stubborn, but funny. So I loved it so much, and I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. The next book I read I actually listened to on audiobook, and that is Love Does by Bob Goff, and this is a Christian like self-help book, I guess. I'm not a Christian, but I've been kind of like dabbling into looking into like Christian literature, because I think religion is such an interesting topic, and I like to see how people like use it in their everyday lives, and Bob Goff is one of the most known Christian writers and speakers of the time. I was recommended this book a while back by one of my friends who I actually met on the internet, and we were talking about like religion, and she's a Christian, and I was talking about how like my issues with Christianity and just like religion in general, and so she recommended me reading this book to see sort of how she sees it, because she agrees with a lot with Bob Goff says. I really liked it. I love the audiobook. It was narrated by Bob, which makes so much sense. It felt so much more personal, and I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read I got out from the library, and that is Diary of a Tokyo Teen, which was like a graphic novel type of thing. It was this girl, I think she's 16, and I don't really remember what it was about, but I believe she is from Tokyo and then like went to America and then went back to Tokyo to like re-experience her thing. But basically this book was her drawings of everyday life for a teenager in Tokyo, Japan. And if you don't know, I'm obsessed with Japanese culture, literature, all of it. I think it's so interesting. I really want to go to Japan, and so I saw it at the library, and it was a super quick read. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. It wasn't anything spectacular, but it was interesting. The next book I read is Nothing to Prove by Jennie Allen. This is another Christian self-help book, and this one was interesting because there was kind of like activities, I guess. So there was like a way to incorporate what she was talking about in the book in your life. So this book dealt a lot with the issue of not feeling like you're good enough and that you always have to prove yourself, and how like God is there for you to help, to show you that you have nothing to prove. And I really liked this one. I give this one 4.5 out of 5 stars. I just thought it was super interesting, and I thought it was really beautiful, and just like the overall like displaying, what's the word, like the quality of the book was really good. So I really liked this one. If you're looking for some Christian self-help books, should check this one out. The next book I read isn't really a book. Well, it's a book, but it's a book of quotes, and it's the Bell's Library book that came out because of the live action Beauty and the Beast. And this is just a book of quotes. It has quotes from a bunch of famous authors. It just says a collection of literary quotes and inspirational musings. So like it's literally just quotes. Like the whole book is just quotes. But I read it really quickly, obviously, and I liked it a lot. It was interesting, and it's a beautiful book, so I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. The next book I read was actually a reread, and it was one of the books that I wanted to reread in 2017. I had it in like my 2017 TBR, and that is Every Heart a Doorway by Shannon McGuire. This is literally one of my all-time favorite books. I love it so much. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. It's about these kids, so kids that have gone to places like Narnia, Wonderland, Candyland, all those types of things, and when they come back from those worlds, they can't cope with not being in those worlds anymore, so they go to this school. It's called Miss Eleanor School for Wayward Children, I believe. Eleanor West Home for Wayward Children is what it's called. But it follows the main character, Nancy, who had been to sort of an underworld, and it's her journey being in the school. And it's such a short book. It's only 150 pages. I recommended it to everyone I know. It's my favorite, and I was in a reading slump, so I reread it and I loved it so much. So if you haven't read this book yet, you have to, and I think the second book's coming out like really soon, and I'm so excited for it. The next book I read is another book that I had to read for class. Well, we didn't read it in class, we watched it in class, and that is An Enemy of the People by Henrik Ibsen, who is a Norwegian playwright, but it's under the name in English of Arthur Miller, who's a famous playwright, who's actually one of my favorite playwrights. It's actually in his like bind up of all of his works. An Enemy of the People is in here, which I thought was super interesting. Let's see if I can find it. Here it is, An Enemy of the People, which I thought was so weird because he didn't actually write it. He just is known for the adaptation of it. It's like a movie adaptation. It was made in the 60s. But anyway, I loved it so much. I give 5 out of 5 stars. I was not expecting to love it as much as I did. I mean, knowing it was Arthur Miller, and Arthur Miller is one of my favorites. I'm not holding this book up, by the way, because it's just too heavy. But like Arthur Miller is literally one of my favorite playwrights of all time. Death of a Salesman is so genius, and I just love it so much. So like, knowing that it was Arthur Miller, I knew I was gonna like it, but I wasn't expecting to love it as much as I did. It's the story of these two brothers. One of them is the mayor of a town. It's like a small town. One of them is the mayor, and one of them is the doctor, who is also a scientist. And the brother, who is a doctor, discovers that there are these springs. They're called like the Kirsten Springs. And the water in the springs is making people sick. And so he tells his brother, like, hey, we have to shut down the springs because it's making people sick. And his brother was like, no, you're a liar. You just are doing this for attention. And basically the whole town follows the mayor's orders, who's his literal brother, and goes against him. And they declare him an enemy of the people because they think he's a liar. And there's so many insane quotes that are so amazing. And I love it so much. I will link my Goodreads review to it down below because I think I fleshed it out a lot there. I loved it so much, and it's so relevant to today. So if you want to read a book that's like mind-blowingly relevant, even though it was written in like 1890s, definitely read this book because it's so amazing. If you're looking for it at the store, it's under Arthur Miller's name. So the next book I read was also from the library, and that is Dusk or Dark or Dawn or Day. I believe I got that right. Yes, I did. This is a book by Shannon McGuire. It's her newest book, I believe. I think it came out in like January. It was about this woman whose sister died, and she also died, and she's living in a world of like in between life and death. It kind of reminds me of The Archived almost by Victoria Schwab. of that like in between life and death type of thing. And she basically, it's a very short book, but it wasn't fleshed out very well. I didn't really like it. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. It was not very memorable. Like I'm having a hard time telling you what it was about, even though I read it like a month ago. But I mean, it was fine. Like I could understand why people would like it, but it just wasn't my type of thing, which was kind of disappointing because I was like, Shannon Maguire, ah. The next book I read, I don't have because my stepsister-in-law is borrowing it, and that is 13 Reasons Why by Jay Asher. I personally did not read this book until this year. I've never read it before. I've had it recommended to me a bunch of times, but I never actually read it until the TV show came out, and I read it before I watched the TV show. And when I read it, I was not in a good place, like at all. I mean, these past few months have been a little rough, and I was just not in a good place, and I really probably shouldn't have read it and watched the TV show in that period of time because it was just really bad. So I liked it. I like the TV show better. I do understand that the TV show is very triggering and like very problematic, and I totally understand that, and like I get it because it was triggering for me. And the book I liked, but I didn't love it. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars because I just thought it was like, it was what it was. It was fine. But yeah, that's my opinions on 13 Reasons Why. I thought the TV show was entertaining, but I don't think they approached the situation in the right way. The next book I read was another reread, and that was the graphic novel Nimona by Noelle Stevenson, which is one of my all-time favorite graphic novels ever. It's so good. It's about supervillains and like anti-heroes, and that's like my favorite thing in the whole world. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars, obviously. It's just so good. If you are looking for a good graphic novel and you like Noelle Stevenson's art style and you like anti-hero supervillain type thing, definitely read it. It's so enjoyable, and there's only one book. It's not a series, so you don't have to worry about like catching up. It's so good. The next book I read is very short, and that is Dear, okay, I might say this wrong. It's Dear Ijewele, A Feminist Manifesto and 15 Suggestions by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. And this book is so tiny. It's like even so little, like compared to, okay, so this is A Court of Thorns and Roses. Like literally, this is the size comparison. It's like the littlest book in the whole world. But I read this because I heard Ariel Bissett talk about it in one of her wrap-up videos, and she thought it was really good, and I was just super interested in it. I've read only one other thing by Chimamanda, and that was her We Should All Be Feminists speech. I got that on ebook, and this is about the same length actually. It's only like 60 pages long, and the text is like huge. But basically the premise of the story is that one of Chimamanda's friends wrote to her, and her friend had just had a baby, and said like, do you have any tips for raising my daughter feminist? And this is the letter that she wrote back to her friend, saying like, these are the 15 things that I say you should do to, you know, raise your daughter as a feminist. Obviously, she said, she was like, I'm not an expert on this, but this is what I would do, and this is what I plan to do when I have children. So I thought it was super interesting. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I will definitely be going back to this when I'm at that point in my life when I want to have children, but I did really enjoy this. And it's super short. I read it in literally an hour. The next book I read, don't have the dust jacket on because what else is new, is A Court of Thorns and Roses. And I reread this in preparation for A Court of Wings and Ruin. I also reread A Court of Mist and Fury. But, I hate this book. Well, okay, I don't hate it, but I literally only reread it for the Rhysand chapters, which happens like literally the last like 100 pages. It was interesting. It was alright. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars because, you know, Tamlin's the worst. And then I'm also currently rereading A Court of Mist and Fury. I still haven't read ACOWAR. I don't know what's wrong with me. I still haven't read it. I'm a little concerned. I just read the scene in ACOMAF with the Court of Nightmares. That's literally where I am. I'm so close to being done. I need to finish it, and there's gonna be so many sexy times, and I'm so ready for it. But yeah, that's where I am at in my life with ACOTAR stuff. So I started A Court of Wings and Ruin, so don't spoil it. If you spoil it, I'm literally gonna block you. I'm gonna be so mad, so don't do it. And then the last book that I read is actually a book of poetry, and I read this yesterday. Is this the last book I read? Yes, it is. And that is The Universe of Us by Lang Liev. This is a book of poetry, like I said, and I love her poetry style. She does write in verse sometimes, but most of them are just like paragraphs. Just like small little paragraphs. Oh, there was one in verse. Let's find it. There it is. I loved this so much. I totally understand why people love her. This is actually a signed copy as well. There you go. But I bought this around the holidays last year because I got a bunch of gift cards for Christmas, and then I ended up buying that book because it was a signed copy and I was interested into reading some Lang Liev. And I really liked it. So yeah, it was good. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars because it wasn't like my favorite thing in the whole world, but it was still pretty good. So yeah, these are all the books that I read in the months that I was gone, the 2 months. And I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did like it, please give it a thumbs up. And leave me a comment down below telling me what your favorite book was that you have read so far this year. I love to hear it. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye!